Star Wars Republic Commando Hard Contact by Karen Travis. Copyright 2004 by Lucasfilm Ltd. Prologue. Okay, this is how it happened. It's pitch black below, and we are fast roping into the crevice too fast. I can feel the impact in my back teeth when I land. I'm first down, and I flood the chamber with my helmet spot lamp. There's a triple-sealed blast door between us and the Geonosians, and I haven't got time to calculate the charge needed to blow it. A lot. Then, P for plenty, like I was taught. Stick the thermal tape around the edges and push in the detonator. Easier said than done. The alloy doors covered with crud. Delta Squad, CO gets on the helmet comlink. You having a party down there, Theta? Can't rush an artist. You want to tell that to the spider droids. Patience, Delta. Come on. Stick to the metal, will you? Nearly there. A lot of spider droids. I hear you, Delta. In your own time, no pressure, none at all. Clear. We flatten ourselves against the cavern walls. It's all the right light and painful noise and flying dust for a fraction of a second. When we can see again, the doors are blown inward, ripped apart, billowing smoke. Delta Squad, clear to enter. Take. I thought you'd never ask. Delta Squad hits the ground, and they're straight in, firing, while we stand back and cover their six. It's a warren of tunnels down here. If we're not careful, something could jump us from any direction. My helmet's supposed to protect against high decibels, but war is noisy. Really noisy. I can't hear my helmet comlink through the oomph of the Geonosians. Sonic rounds and our own blaster file. I can hear anti-armor going off too. Perfect. I can feel it through my boots. Movement catches my eye up ahead, and then it's gone. I'm looking up through the DC-17 scope, checking that it was just my imagination, and Taylor gestures toward another of the 5 tunnels facing us. Dawman, take that E-Reb, and hold these positions, he beckons, Vin and Jay, and they move almost back to back, toward the mouth of the tunnel, checking to all sides. And then I look up, overhead. There's more Geonosians around than we thought. A lot more. I take down 2 above me, and then more come out of the tunnel to the left, so I open fire with a repeating blaster. Nice and early, because if I let them get too close, the blast will fry me as well. Even so, it's knocking me back like a trip hammer. Taylor, Dawman here, over. I can't see him. I can't see any of them. But I can hear rapid fire. Taylor, Dawman here. You receiving me? Over. Not so much silence as an absence of a familiar voice. Then a few fragmented, crackling shouts of, down, man down here. Who's down? Taylor, Vin, Jay. You receiving? Over? I've lost contact with my squad. It's the last time I see them. 1. Scramble line encrypted. Stand by. Geonosis forward control to fleet support. Ord Mantell. Prepare to receive CaseVac transport. Med triage team. Estimate serious injuries. 12,000. Repeat, 12,000. Walking wounded 8,000. Repeat, 8,000. ETA 10 hours. Logistics priority for Bacta tank support teams. Prep for 72,000 combat fit troops. Repeat, 72,000. Pending redeployment. Priority weapons support for Commando units. That is all. Out. Republic assault ships implacable. Inbound for extraction from Geonosis. Stand by. Republic Commando 1136 studied every face in line, waiting to board the gunships. Some were helmeted and some were not, but one way or another, they all had his face, and they were all strangers. Move it, the loadmaster shouted, gesturing side to side, with one outstretched arm. Come on, shift it, people, fast as you can. The gunships dropped down in clouds of dust, and troopers embarked, some turning to pull comrades inboard, so the ships could lift again quickly. There was no reason to scramble for it. They'd done it 1,000 times in training. Extractions from a real battle was what they'd prepared for. This wasn't a retreat. They'd grabbed their first victory. The gunship's downdraft kicked the red Geonosian soil into the air. RC-1136, Darman, took off his helmet and ran his gauntlets carefully across the pale gray dome, wiping away the dust and noting a few scrapes and burn marks. The loadmaster turned to him. He was one of the very, very few outsiders whom Darman had ever seen working with the Grand Army. A short, wrinkled Duros with a temper to match. Are you embarking or what? Darman continued wiping his helmet. I'm waiting for my mates, he said. You shift your shiny silver backside now, the loadmaster said irritably. I got a schedule. Darman carefully brought up his knuckle plate, just under the loadmaster's chin, and held it there. He didn't need to eject the vibroblade, and he didn't need to say a word. He'd made his point. Well, whenever you're ready, sir, the Duros said, stepping back to Chevy clone troopers instead. It wasn't a great idea to upset a commando, especially not one coming down from the adrenaline high of combat. But there was still no sign of the rest of his squad. Darman knew that there was no point in waiting any longer. They hadn't called in. Maybe they had comlink failures. Maybe they had made it onto another gunship. It was the first time in his artificially short life that Darman hadn't been able to reach out and touch the men he had been raised with. He waited half a standard hour more anyway, until the gunships became less frequent, and the lines of troopers became shorter. Eventually, there was nobody standing on the desert plain but him, the Duros land loadmaster, and half a dozen clone troopers. It was the last lift of the day. You better come now, sir, the loadmaster said. There's nobody unaccounted for, nobody alive, anyway. Darman looked around the horizon one last time. still feeling as if he were turning his back on someone, reaching out to him. "I'm coming," he said, and brought up the rear of the line. As the gunship lifted, he watched the swirling dust, dwindling rock formations, and scattered shrinking patches of scrub, until Geonosis became a blur of dull red. He could still search for the implacable. It wasn't over yet. The gunship slipped into the implacable's giant docking bay, and Daman looked down into the cavern, onto a sea of right armor and orderly movement. The first thing that struck him when the gunship killed its thrusters and locked down on its pad was how quiet everyone seemed. In the crowded bay full of troopers, the air stank of sweat and stale fear, and the throat-rasping smell of discharged blast rifles. But it was so silent that if Daman hadn't seen the evidence of exhausted and injured men, he'd have believed that nothing significant had happened in the last 30 hours. The deck vibrated under the soles of his boots. He was still staring down at them, studying the random patterns of Geonosian dust that clung to them, when an identical pair came into view. "Number," said a voice. That was also his own. The commander strapped him with a tally sensor. He didn't need Daman to tell him his number, or anything else for that matter, because the sensors in the enhanced Catan armor reported his status silently, electronically. No significant injury. The triage team on Geonosis had raved him past, concentrating on the injured, ignoring both those too badly hurt to help and those who could help themselves. "Are you listening to me? Come on, talk to me, son." "I'm okay, sir," he said. "Sir, RC-1136. I'm not in shock. I'm fine." He paused. Nobody else was going to call him by his squad nickname, Daman, again. They were all dead. He knew it. Jay, Vin, Taylor. He just knew. "Sir, any news of RC-1135? "No," said the commander, who had obviously heard similar questions every time he stopped to check. He gestured with a small bar in his hand. "If they're not in casevac or listed on this sweep, then they didn't make it." It was stupid to ask, Daman. Should have known better. Clone troopers, and especially Republic commandos, just got on with the job. That was their sole purpose. And they were lucky. Their training sergeant had told them, outside, in the ordinary world, every being from every species in the galaxy fretted about their purpose in life, searching for meaning. A clone didn't need to. Clones knew. They had been perfected for their role. Undoubted need never troubled them. Daman had never known what doubt was until now. No amount of training had prepared him for this. He found a space against a bulkhead and sat down. A clone trooper settled down next to him, squeezing into the gap and briefly clunking a shoulder plate against his. They glanced at each other. Daman rarely had any contact with the other clones. Commandos trained apart from everyone, including ARC troopers. The troopers' armor was right, lighter, less resistant, Commandos enjoyed upgraded protections, and Diamond displayed no rank colors. But they both knew exactly who and what they were. Nice dice, the trooper said enviously. He was looking at the DC-17. Troopers were issued the heavier, lower-spec rifle, the DC-15, ion pulse blaster, RPG, anti-armor, and sniper. Yeah. Every item of its gear was manufactured to a higher spec. A trooper's life was less valuable than a commando's. It was the way things were. And Darman had never questioned it. Not for long, anyway. Full house? Tidy, the trooper nodded approval. Job done, eh? Yeah, Darman said quietly. Job's done. The trooper didn't say anything else. Maybe he was wary of conversations with commandos. Darman knew what troopers thought about him and his kind. They don't train like us, and they don't fight like us. They don't even talk like us. A bunch of prima donnas. Darman didn't think he was arrogant. It was just that he could do every job a soldier could be called upon to do, and then some. Siege assault, counterinsurgency, hostage extractions, demolitions, assassinations, surveillance, and every kind of infantry activity on any terrain, and in any environment at any time. He knew he could, because he'd done it. He'd done it in training, first with simulations, and then with live rounds. He'd done it with his squad, the three brothers with whom he'd spent every moment of his conscious life. They'd competed against other squads, thousands just like them, but not like them, because they were squad brothers, and that was special. He had never been taught how to live apart from the squad, though. Now he would learn the hardest way of all. Darman had absolutely confidence that he was one of the best special ops soldiers ever created. He was undistracted by the everyday concerns of raising a family and making a living. Things that his instructors said he was lucky never to know. But now he was alone. Very, very alone. It was very distracting indeed. He considered this for a long time in silence. Surviving when the rest of your squad had been killed was no cause for pride. It felt instead like something his training sergeant had described as shame. That was what you felt when you lost a battle, apparently. But they had run. It was their first battle, and they had run. The landing ramp of the Implacable eased down, and the bright sunlight of Order Mantell streamed in. Darman replaced his helmet without thinking and stood in an orderly line, waiting to disembark and be reassigned. He was going to be chilled down, kept in suspended animation until duty called again. So this was the aftermath of victory. He wondered how much worse defeat might feel. Embrani Krilua, 40 light years from Order Mantell, Tingle Arm. The field of Bach flowed from silver to ruby as the wind from the southwest bent the ripening grain in waves. It could have been a perfect late summer day. Instead, it was turning into one of the worst days of Etain Ter Mukan's life. Etain had run, and she'd had nothing left in her. She flung herself flat between the furrows, not caring where she fell. Etain held her breath as something stinking and wet squelched under her. The pursuing weak ray couldn't hear her above the wind. She knew, but she held her breath anyway. "Hey, girlie." His boots crunched closer. He was panting. "Where'd you go? Don't be shy. Don't breathe. I got bottle of Urquell. You want to have party?" He had a remarkably large vocabulary for a weak ray. All of it centered on his basin needs. "I fun when you get to know me. I should have waited for it to get dark. I could influence his mind, trying to make him leave." But she hadn't, and she couldn't. Try as she might to concentrate, she was too full of adrenaline and uncontrolled panic. "Come on, you scraggind. Where are you? I find you." It sounded as if he was kicking his way through the crop and getting closer. If she got up and ran for it, she was dead. If she stayed where she was, he'd find her eventually. He wasn't going to get bored, and he wasn't going to give up. "Girlie." The weak ray's voice was close. To her right, about 20 meters away. She sipped a strangled breath and clamped her lips shut again. Lungs aching, eyes streaming with the effort. "Girlie." Closer. He was going to step right on her. "Girlie." She knew what he'd do when he found her. If she was lucky, he'd kill her afterward. The weak way was interrupted by a loud, wet thrack. He let out a grunt, and then there was a second thrack, shorter, sharper, harder. Etain heard a squeal of pain. "How many times have I got to tell you, Decoot?" It was a different voice, human, with a hard edge of authority. Thrack. "Don't waste my time." Another thrack. Another squeal. Etain kept her face pressed in the dirt. "You get drunk one more time, you go chasing females one more time, and I'm going to slit you from here to here." The weak ray shrieked. It was the sort of incoherent animal sound that beings made when pain overwhelmed them. Etain had heard too much of that sound in her short time on Quilua. Then there was silence. She hadn't heard the voice before, but she didn't need to. She knew exactly who it belonged to. Etain strained to listen, half expecting a heavy boot to suddenly stamp on her back. But all she could hear was the swish and crunch of two pairs of feet wadding through the crop, away from her. She caught snatches of the fading conversations as the wind took it. The weak way was still being berated. More important, what was? Later, but right now, Decoot, I need you to, okay? Or I'll cut. Etain waited. Eventually, All she could hear was the breath of the wind, the rustling grain, and the occasional flitting call of a ground eel seeking a mate. She allowed herself to breathe normally again, but still she waited, face down in ripe manure, until dusk started to fall. She had to move now. The Gadans would be out hunting, combing the fields in packs. On top of that, the smell that hadn't bothered her while she was griped by Tara was starting to really bother her now. She eased herself up on her elbows, then her knees, and looked around. Why did they have to manure Bach so late in the season anyway? She fumbled in the pockets of her cloak for a cloth. Now if only she could find a stream, she could clean herself up. She pulled a handful of stalks, crushed them into a ball, and tried to scrape off the worst of the dung and debris stuck to her. That's a pretty expensive crop to be using for that, a voice said. Eating gulped in a breath and spun around to find a local in a grubby smock, scowling at her. He looked thin, worn out, and annoyed. He was holding a threshing tool. Do you know how much that stuff's worth? I'm sorry, she said, sliding her hand carefully inside her cloak. She felt for the familiar cylinder. She hadn't wanted the Weequay to know that she was a Jedi. But if this farmer was considering turning her in for a few loaves or a bottle of Urquell, she needed her lightsaber handy. It was your bark or my life, I'm afraid. The farmer stared at the crushed stalks and the scattered bead-like grains. Tight-lipped, yes. Bark fetched a huge price in the restaurants of Coruscant. It was a luxury, and the people who grew it for export couldn't afford it. That didn't seem to bother the Namodians, who controlled the trade. It never did. I'll pay for the damage, Eighteen said, her hand still inside the cloak. What were they after you for? The farmer asked, ignoring her offer. The usual, she said. Oh, you're not that good looking. Charming. I know who you are. Oh no. Her grip closed. You do? I reckon. A little more food for his family. A few hours drunken oblivion. Courtesies of Urquell. That was all she was to him. He made as if to step closer, and she drew her arm clear of her cloak, because she was fed up with running and she didn't like the look of that threshing tool. Vzm. Oh great, the farmer sighed, eyeing the shaft of pure blue light. Not one of you lot. That's all we need. Yes, she said, and held the lightsaber steady in front of her face. Her stomach had nodded, but she kept her voice under control. I am Padawan Etain Termukan. You can try to turn me in, if you want to test my skill, but I'd prefer that you help me instead. Your call, sir. The farmer stared at the lightsaber, as if he was trying to work out a price for it. Didn't help your master much, that thing, did it? Master Fulia was unfortunate and betrayed. She lowered the lightsaber, but didn't cut the beam. Are you going to help me? We are going to have Gez Hokan's thugs all over us if I think they're busy, Etin said. What do you want from us? Shelter for the moment. The farmer sucked his teeth thoughtfully. Okay, come on, Padawan. Get used to calling me Etain, please. She thumbed off the lightsaber. The light died with a frum sound, and she slipped the hilt back inside her cloak. Just to be on the safe side, Etain trailed after him, trying not to smell herself, but it was hard, nauseatingly hard. Even a scent-hunting Gadan wouldn't recognize her as a human. It was getting dark now, and the farmer kept glancing over his shoulder at her. He shook his head, engaged in some internal conversations. I'm Baran, and this is my land. And I thought you lot were supposed to be able to use some sort of mind control tricks. How do you know I haven't? Etain lied. He said, and nothing more. She wasn't going to volunteer the obvious if he hadn't spotted it for himself. A disappointment to her master. She was clearly not the best of the bunch. She struggled with the Force, and she grappled with self-discipline. And she was here because she and Master Fulia happened to be nearby when a job needed doing. Fulia never could resist a challenge and long odds, and it looked as if he'd paid the price. They hadn't found his body yet, but there had been no word from him either. Yes, Etain was a Padawan, technically speaking. She just happened to be one who was a breath away from building pumadomes in refugee camps. She reasoned that part of a Jedi skill was the simple use of psychology, and if Burhan wanted to think the Force was strong in her, and that there was a lot more behind the external shell of a gawky, plain girl covered in stinky dung, then that was fine by her. It would keep her alive a little longer while she worked out what to do next. Fleet support, Ord Mantell, Block 5 Epsilon. It was a rotten race. RC-1309 busied himself maintaining his boots. He cleaned out the clamps, blowing the red dust clear with a squirt of air from the pressure gun. He rinsed the liners and shook them dry. There was no point being idle while he was waiting to be chilled down. Sergeant. He looked up. The commander who had walked in placed his survival pack armor and black bodysuit on the bunk opposite and steered back. His readout panel identified him as RC-8015. I'm Phi, he said, and held out his hand for shaking. So, you lost your squad too, Nina, RC-1309 said, without taking the proffered hand. So, Nervad, my brother, you are the sole survivor, yes. Did you hold back while your brothers pressed on? Or were you just lucky? Phi stood there with his hands on his hips, identical to Nina in every way except that he was different. He spoke a little differently. He smelled subtly different. He moved his hands, not like Nina's squad did. Not at all. I did my job, Fi said carefully. And I'd rather be with them than here, Nervad. Nina considered him for a while and went back to cleaning his boots. Fi put his kit in the locker beside the bunks, then swung himself up into the top rack in one smooth motion. He folded his arms under his head very precisely and lay staring up at the bulkhead as if he were meditating. If he had been Sev, Nana would have known exactly what he was doing, even without looking. But Sev was gone. Clone troopers lost brothers in training. So did commandos. But troopers were socialized with whole sections, platoons, companies, even regiments. And that meant that even after the inevitable deaths and removals during live exercises, there were still plenty of people around you whom you knew well. Commandos worked solely with each other. Nina had lost everyone he had grown up with, and so had Fi. He lost a brother before, 2-8, on exercise. The 3 survivors had welcomed the replacements, although they had always felt he was slightly different, a little distant, as if he had never quite believed he'd been accepted. But they performed to expected levels of excellence together. And as long as they did, their Kaminoans, technicians, and motley band of alien instructors didn't seem to care how they felt about it. But the commandos cared. They just kept it to themselves. It was a race, Nina said. What was, Fi said. Deploying us in an operation like Geonosis. It was an infantry job, not special ops. That sounds like criticisms of, I'm just making the point that we couldn't perform to maximum effectiveness. Understood. Maybe when we're revived, we'll be able to do what we're really trained for. Nina wanted to say that he missed his squad, but that wasn't something to confide in a stranger. He inspected his boots and was satisfied. Then he stood up and spread his body suit flat on the mattress and checked it for vacuum integrity with the sweep sensor in his glove. It was a ritual so ingrained in him that he hardly thought about it. Maintain boots, suit, and armor plates. Recalibrate helmet systems. Check heads-up displays to strip down and reassemble DC-17. Empty and repack. Survival pack. Done. It took him 26 minutes and 20 seconds. Give or take 2 seconds. Well-maintained gear was often the difference between life and death. So was 2 seconds. He closed the top of his pack with a clack and secured the seal. Then he checked the catches that held the separate ordnance pack to see that they were moving freely. That mattered when he needed to jettison explosive materials fast. When he glanced up, Fi was propped on one elbow, looking down at him from the bunk. Dry rations go on the 5th layer, he said. Nina always packed them farther down, between his spare rappelling line and his hygiene kit. In your squad, maybe, he said, and carried on. Fi took the hint and rolled over on his back again, no doubt to meditate on how differently things might be done in the future. After a while, he stared, singing very quietly, almost under his breath. Kamrok tsasad droten trok nyun uis adin daha verda aden tratu. They were the wrath of the warrior's shadow and the gauntlet of the republic. Nana knew the song. It was a traditional Mandalorian war chant, designed to boost the morale of normal men who needed a bit of psyching up before a fight. The words had been altered a little to have meaning for the armies of cloned warriors. We don't need all that, Nina thought. We were born to fight, nothing else. But he found himself joining in anyway. It was a comfort. He placed his gear in the locker, rolled onto his bunk, and matched notes and beats perfectly with Fi. Two identical voices in the deserted barrack room. Nana would have traded every remaining moment of his life for a chance to rerun the previous day's engagement. He would have held Sev and Dee back. He would have sent 04 west with the E-Reb cannon. But he hadn't. Our vengeance burns brighter still. Fi's voice trailed off into silence, the merest fractions of a section before Nina's. He heard him swallow hard. I was up there with them, Sarge, he said quietly. I didn't hang back, not at all. Nina closed his eyes. He regretted hinting that Fi might have done anything less. I know, brother, he said. I know. 2. Clone personnel have free will, even if they do follow orders. If they couldn't think for themselves, we'd be better off with droids. And they're a lot cheaper too. They have to be able to respond to situations we can't imagine. Will that change them in ways we can't predict? Perhaps. But they have to be mentally equipped to win wars. Now thaw those men out. They have a job to do. Jedi Master Oligan Zay, Intelligence Officer. Secure briefing room, fleet support, Order Mantell. 3 standard months after Geonosis. Fleet support base hadn't been built to accommodate tens of thousands of troops, and it showed. The briefing room was a cold store, and it still smelled of food and spices. Damen could see the loading rails that spanned the ceiling, but he kept his focus on the holoscreen in front of him. It didn't feel so bad to be revived after stasis. He was still a commando. They hadn't reconditioned him. That meant he'd performed to expected standards at Geonosis. He'd done well. He felt positive. But his helmet felt different. There was a lot more data on the HUD. The heads-up display. He flicked between modes for a while, controlling each command with rapid blinks, noting the extra systems and hardware that had been installed since Geonosis. Sitting to his left was his new sergeant, who preferred to be called Nina when superior officers weren't around, and RC-8015, nicknamed Phi. They too were the sole survivors of their squads. At least they knew what he was going through. There was a fourth makeshift seat in the row, a blue alloy packing crate, and it was unoccupied. Jedi Master Oligan Zay, hands clasped behind his back, paced up and down in front of the screen, cloak flapping, breaking the hollow projections each time. Another Jedi, who had not been identified, was splitting his attentions between Zay and the three helmeted commandos sitting absolutely still on the row of crates. The reflective surfaces of the spray-clean alloy walls enabled Dahman to discreetly observe an unusual alien, one he had never seen before. He had been trained to take in every detail of his surroundings, although it was very difficult not to notice the creature. The alien was about 1.5 meters long, and it was slinking around the walls, sniffing. Black-furred and glossy, it browsed on long, delicate legs, thrusting a narrow muzzle into crevices and exhaling sharply each time it did. Earlier, Dahman had heard Zay address it as Valakil. He also said it was a Gurlanian, a shapeshifter. Dahman had heard about shapeshifters in training, but this wasn't a Claudite. He was watching its reflection in his right field peripheral vision when the door swung open and another commander entered, helmet tucked rigidly under his right arm, and saluted smartly. RC-3222, sir, he said. Apologies for keeping you, sir. The medics didn't want to discharge me. No wonder. There was a stripe of raw flesh across his face that started just under his right eye, ran clean across his mouth, and finally ended at the left side of his jaw. He certainly didn't look like any of the other clones now. Dahman wondered what level of persuasions it had taken to get the medical staff to skip a course of Bacta. Are you fit, soldier? Zay said. Fight to fight, sir. He sat down next to Dahman and assumed the same ramrod posture, glancing at him briefly in acknowledgement. So this was their fourth man. They were a squad again, numerically anyway, Omega Squad. The other Jedi was staring at the newcomer with an expression of barely concealed astonishment. They seemed to notice and nudge his colleagues. Padawan Drusik is new to clone armies, as are we all. That was understandable. Dahman had never seen Jedi before the Battle of Geonosis, and he was equally fascinated. You'll excuse his curiosity. Zay gestured at the holoscreen. This is your objective, gentlemen. Quilura. He glanced at his datapod, reading intensely. This data has been obtained from high-altitude reconnaissance, so it has its limitations. Zay went on. Quilura is technically neutral. Unfortunately, Its neutral status is likely due to end very soon. He had referred to them as gentlemen. Maybe they didn't know what to call commandos. It was still early days for all of them. The image on the screen began as a blue and white disc, zooming in to views of chains of islands, deep river inlets, and rolling plains peppered with patches of woodland and game-board fields. It looked pleasant and peaceful, and hence utterly alien to Daman, whose entire life beyond Tapulca City had been spent on battlefields, real or virtual. You're looking at farming communities, almost all of them located here, in this region, because it's the most fertile land, they said. They produce bark, gushayan, and 50% of the luxury foodstuffs and beverages in the galaxy. There's also gem mining. The population is nevertheless living at subsistence level, and there is no government other than the law of commerce and profit. Namodian traders effectively own the planet, or at least the productive areas that are of use to them. They enforce their stewardship through a militia controlled by Gez Hokan, a Mandalorian so unpleasantly violent that he was actually asked to leave the Death Squad for enjoying his work too much. Jasik looked up from his datapad. He appeared to be following the presentation. Scum, he said. One of our sources calls them scum, indicating a very disagreeable group of people. They paused for breath, as if to ensure that the last snippet of information had made its point. Given how thinly stretched our resources are, we are unfortunately unable to justify intervening to deal with any injustice on Quilora at this time. But we have excellent intelligence that indicates a significant military asset located there. Damen was listening and still watching the Gulanian peripherally. It had moved around the room to sit upright beside Jusek, with its front paws neatly clasped before its chest. He was also observing Jusek. The Padawan still appeared riveted by the commandos. Daman was careful not to stare, even though any eye movement was disguised by his helmet, because Jedi knew things without having to see. His instructors had told him so. Jedi were omniscient, omnipotent, and to be obeyed at all times. Daman hung on Zay's every word. Quilora isn't on the main lane, so to speak, Zay said. Ideal for hiding, if that's your intentions. And there are things hidden there. We need you to apprehend one and destroy the other. A separatist scientist, Ovolat Krael Uthan, and her most recent project, a nanovirus. We have reason to believe both are at a research facility on Quilora. They paused, and Jusek filled the space. We have a Jedi there, Master Casfolier, but we haven't heard from him or his Padawan in some weeks. Zay picked up again. And let me assure you that we've been searching diligently for them. We have a location for our targets, but no plans of the buildings. The lack of plans will make your retrieval and sabotage task more challenging, as will the communications questions. Niner raised a gloved hand from his lap. Sir, what is the comm situations exactly? Namorians. Not quite with you, sir. Zay looked blank for a moment, and then his face lit up with revelations. The Namorians own and control all the infrastructure. The native populations scarcely have pits for refreshers, but their overlords enjoy the finest comlink net and air traffic control that credits can buy. They like to ensure that nobody does business without their knowledge. So they monitor everything, and very little intelligence comes out. You'll have to avoid using the long-range comlink. Do you understand me, soldier? Sir, yes, sir, General Zay. There was a pause, a long pause, and Zay looked along the row of 3 helmets and a damaged face, as if waiting for something. The Jedi had said he hadn't worked with clones before. Maybe he was expecting a dialogue. He stopped at Daman. The potential embarrassment to the master prompted Daman to fill the silent void. It was an obvious question to ask, really. What's the nature of the nanovirus, sir? Zay's head moved back just a fractions. An intelligent and significant question, he said. Thank you, sir. The answer, then, should be of great interest to you personally. It appears to be specifically aimed at clone personnel. The sleek black Gulanian drew itself up to a greater height. They fear you, and with good reason, it said in a deep, liquid voice. So they wish to kill as all ignorant beings do, when they encounter something they fear and misunderstand. It continued elongating, and now appeared to be standing. It had changed shape. Yes, Zay said slowly, dragging the word into 2 syllables. And he looked away from the spectacle of molecular rearrangement. At this time, you still have an advantage. The Separatists almost certainly aren't aware of your potential as clone commandos. They have no idea what you can achieve. And perhaps we have no idea either. But you have been created for excellence, and trained to realize that potential by the most experienced instructors in the galaxy. We have very high expectations. Zay slipped his hands into his cloak. Head lowered slightly. If you happen to find Master Folier safe, we would be relieved, but Uthen and the facility are your main priorities. Do you understand everything I have said? Yes, sir, Dahmer nodded once, and so did the others. But it wasn't quite a synchronized movement. We'll get it right, he thought. A couple of days training, that'll sort it. Train hard, fight easy. I'll leave you to my Padawan then, Zay said, and swept out, pausing briefly at the door to look back at the commandos, tilting his head as if he was either amazed or amused. Jusek swallowed hard. The Guranian flowed from a column back into a full-limbed thing, and moved to sit beside RC-3222, gazing up at him. The commando didn't react. Ah, it sighed. It had a voice like running water. My, that's indeed Fret's face. Fascinating. Jusek gestured to the exit. I'm your armorer, he said. Weapons and data. Follow me and I'll show you what you'll have at your disposal. The commanders rose as one, more or less, and followed him through the door, and down a passage still strewn with victualling containers. The place smelled of stewed nerve even through Damian's filtration mask. The Goranian flowed before them, now a sinuous predator, now a trotting quadruped, shifting shape as it went. Jusek stopped at a door at the end of the passage and turned to them. I wonder if I could ask the rest of you to remove your helmets. Nobody asked why, and they all obeyed, even though it wasn't phrased as the unequivocal order they were expecting. The helmet seals made a faint "sss" sounds as they opened. Oh, Jusek said, and stared for a second. Then he opened the door and they stepped into a makeshift armory. It was a cache of treasures. There were upgrades and bolt-ons that Damian knew might fit his existing gear, and ordnance that he didn't recognize, but looked like Republic issue. And there were exotics, weapons he recalled from his database as belonging to a dozen different species, and quite a few that he couldn't place at all, were laid out neatly on trestle tables. It was inviting, almost as inviting as a meal. That all looks rather useful, sir, Nina said. Delta Squad has been collecting a few things here and there, Jusek said. The commandos were focused on the weaponry, but Damian was also noting Jusek's behavior with growing interest. The Padawan stood back to let the men get a closer look at the armaments, but he was watching them carefully. You're nothing like droids at all, are you? No, sir, Fai said. We are flesh and blood, bred to be the best. Like advanced recon commandos. Not quite ARCs, sir. Not like clone troopers either. We don't work alone, and we don't work in formations. We just look the same. This is your unit of 4 then? A squad? He seemed to be recalling a hurried lesson. Almost like a family. Nina cut in. It is now, sir. He picked up a portable missile launcher that looked slightly different from the standard issue Plex. Light, very light. Merson prototype, Jusek said. Novel alloy, heavier payloads, extra range. It has a micro-repulsor lift stabilizing unit. But they haven't resolved all the more challenging technical issues yet. So consider it shoulder launching. He peered at 322's face. Is that painful? Not too bad, sir, the commando said. But the wound had to hurt like fire. The braided skin was still weeping. I'll see to it later. It didn't seem to be the answer Jusek was expecting, judging by the slight sound he made. Maybe he thought clones didn't feel pain like droids. Do you have names? I don't mean numbers, names. Now that was a very private thing. You kept your name to yourself, your squad, and your training sergeant. Daman was embarrassed for him. My squad called me 18, the wounded commander said. Nina glanced at Phi, but said nothing. 18 was Mandalorian for stubborn. Jusek held up 2 wheels of line that looks like matted rib bone. One black, one white. He took a ribbon of each color, twisted 2 short lengths together, and held up the braid in one hand and a bead-sized detonator in the other. 1 meter is the equivalent yield of a thermal detonator, but its directional ideal for making a flame charge. But be cautious with the quantity if you want to enter the building, rather than destroy it completely. You have some special implosions ordnance for that purpose. Any useful hand-thrown stuff? Daman asked. Stun grenades? We have a few Geonosian sonic detonators and a box of EMPs for anti-droid use. That'll do me fine. I'll take the lot. Nino was watching Daman's intently. You're obviously our demolitions man, he said. Then the sergeant turned back to the Padawan. We've been thoroughly trained, sir. You can have complete confidence in us. That was true, Daman thought. They had been very thoroughly trained day in, day out, for 10 years, and the only time they weren't training was when they were sleeping. Even if they were untested as a special forces unit, apart from playing infantry 3 months ago, Daman had no doubt that they would perform to expected standards. He was happy to have the demolition role. He was proud of his skill in what was delicately known as rapid entry. What do you think happened to Master Filius, sir? Daman asked. He wouldn't normally have posed unnecessary questions, but Alekan Zay had seemed to approve of his curiosity, and Daman was conditioned to do whatever Jedi generals wished. Jusek opened a case of Commando saber darts, and held it out as if offering a tray of ooge cakes. Valakir believes he was betrayed by a native, he said. They've been known to do anything to earn food or a few credits. Daman wondered how a Jedi could be taken by anything less than an army. He'd seen them fight at Geonosis. His warfare was a science. Theirs appeared to be an art. Didn't he have his lightsaber? He did, the Gurlian said. But Master Filia has, or had, some discipline issues. Daman, a soldier able to withstand every priv- provisions in the field, and whose greatest fear was to wither from age rather than die in combat, felt inexplicably uncomfortable at the idea of a Jedi having failings. Master Filia is a courageous Jedi, Jusek said, almost losing his composed manner for a moment. He is simply passionate about justice. Nina diffused the moment. Damen felt reassured by his effortless authority. Sir, how long have we got to plan the mission and attempt a few dry runs? He said. 8 standard hours, Jusek replied, almost apologetic, because that's how long the journey to Krilara will take. You're embarking now. Etain emptied her bag on the straw mattress in the drying barn. Despite appearances, this was the guest suite. Livestock wasn't allowed in the barn at this time of year, because animals had a tendency to eat the bark grain, and that was an awfully expensive way to fatten merlies for the table. The animals were allowed in the main house, and in the winter partly to protect them from prowling Gadans. The house had smelled like it too. Nothing of the merlies, not even their body heat or their pungent odor, was ever wasted. Keeps them bugs away, Burhan had told her. It's a good stink. Etain knelt beside the mattress and tried to think her way out of her predicament. Master Filia was probably dead. If he weren't, he would have returned for her. He had been brilliant, magnificently skilled when he was focused on being so. But he was also impatient and inclined not to walk away from matters that weren't his concern. And those were 2 factors that didn't mix well with a covert mission. He decided one of the Hulkan's thugs needed to learn a lesson in how to respect the local populations. All it took was for one of the Mandalorian's lieutenants to offer the same locals more than the price of a bottle of Urkel to say where and when Filia was in town. Town? That was a joke. And Brawny wasn't Coruscant, not at all. The only infrastructure in the rambling collections of farmsteads was devoted to what it took to grow, harvest, and export its cash crops, and to the comfort of its commercial overlords. Etain had grown up in a world where you could travel at will and send messages easily, and neither of those taken for granted facilities was readily available here. Etain needed one of 2 things right now: to get passage off Quilora, or to get a data transmissions out in her stead. She still had a mission to complete, if only to justify Master Filia's sacrifice. She took a small sphere from the scatterings of possessions on the mattress and opened it in 2 halves, like a sheafna fruit. A hollow chart blossomed into 3 dimensions in her cupped hands, then another, She had layouts of half a dozen Namorian and separatist buildings in the surrounding region, because Fulia hadn't been the only one who was careless. After a few bottles of Urquell, the local construction workers dropped their guard. Etain was neither a natural warrior nor a great charmer, but she was aware of her talent for spotting opportunities and made up for a lot. She wasn't sure if her master's fate was tied into the holoschematics, or if he'd been seen as a direct threat to Uthan. She suspected Gez Hoken might even have done something simply because he didn't much care for Jedi. Play warriors, he called them. He despised anyone who didn't fight with hard metal or their fists. Mandalorians were tough, but Hokan operated at a totally different level of brutality. Etain had realized that the moment she and Fulia had walked through what was left of a four-house village that must have displeased him in some way, she would never erase those images from her mind. She meditated hard twice a day. It still wasn't helping. Settling down on her knees, she tried again, slowing her breathing, calming her heart. The gravel outside the barn crunched. Etain picked up her lightsaber from the mattress as she stuffed the holochart sphere in her tunic. Her thumb to hover over the controls set in the hilt. She should have sensed someone coming, but she had allowed her fatigue and despair to get the better of her. I didn't check for another exit, she thought. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I might have to use this. As the plank door swung open, she flicked the button and the blue light pierced the dusty air. The Merly that wandered in didn't appear impressed, nor did the small elderly woman who followed it. You're jumpy, she said. She had a covered tray in her hands, and something bundled under one arm. The Merly nuzzled Etain's knees, seeking attention. They were distressingly intelligent animals. Nearly a meter high at the shoulder and covered with long brown winglets of wool, their round green eyes were too disturbingly human for Etain's peace of mind. Here's your dinner. Thank you, Etain said, watching as the woman put the tray down on the mattress and placed the bundle of brown fabric beside it. Quite a job getting that dung off your cloak, the woman said, eyeing the lightsaber the way Burhan had. Still a bit damp, but clean. Thank you, Etain repeated. She turned off the blue and peeled the cloth back from the tray. Two rough clay plates held a couple of thin breads and a mush of stew, on top of which whole bark grains were visible. She could smell their cloying musky scent. That quantity of bark was a week's earning for these people. You shouldn't have gone to that trouble for me, Etain said, embarrassed. You're a guest, the woman said. Besides, once I'd scraped the dung off, shame to waste the grains stuck to it, eh? Oh, ah. Etain's stomach rolled, but she kept a steady expression. Coruscant's food hygiene regulations certainly didn't apply here. Very kind of you, she said, and forced a smile. They're coming, you know, the woman said. I'll be ready, Etain lied, and indicated the lightsaber. No, not them. Hokane thugs. Not them at all. Etain wondered whether to press her, but decided against it for the time being. She had no idea who she'd be asking for answers. The woman sighed and shooed them merrily out the door with impatient hands. They're coming all right, she said, and smiled, closing the door behind her.